Hi everyone, my name is Joshua and welcome to Northern Solar. In this month's video, I'm going to be looking back at October 2023 and see how we've done with our solar production here in Cheshire. I'm going to be looking at the facts for the generation, how much we've consumed, how much money it's saved and all of that. As we continue to answer the question, are solar panels worth it? So there's quite a lot to get into this month as usual, so I'll jump straight into the presentation. For those of you that are new to the channel, this is our solar array here at our house in Cheshire. We have 8 kilowatts of solar panels, 4 on the front which face towards the west and 4 on the back which face towards the east. That's 20 panels in total with a 6 kilowatt SolarEdge inverter and 13 kilowatt hours of Growatt battery storage. So, graph for the month, this is our solar production in October. As you can see, absolutely all over the place in terms of good days and bad days as usual. We've got a high here, 19.47 in the middle of the month there, and a low of just 1.64 a few days later on the 20th. So you can see quite a big variation between the good days and bad days. Averaging around 10.4 across the month, giving a total of 323 kilowatt hours for the month of October. So let's see how that looks in comparison to last year. As you can see, we're starting to build up quite a good picture now. For those of you that have been with the channel over the time, we've started in in April 2022. So the blue months are April. As you can see, last year in October we generated more, 366 kilowatt hours at an average of 11.8 compared to 323 at an average of 10.4 this year. So that's actually nearly 12% lower than the generation last year. So if you look back over the last few months where we've got comparisons, last month was pretty close. August and July were terrible compared to last year, but May and June were much better than last year, and April again a little bit lower. So averaging out so far probably somewhere similar, but we'll keep an eye on how things are looking compared to last year as we go on through the winter. So as well as the solar, obviously we also used a lot of energy from the grid. Mostly of this is for charging our car, electric car that we have overnight. We have also started to charge the home battery during October because there's not enough solar to power the house through the night unless we put extra power into the battery overnight on our cheap rate tariff, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail. So this two graphs here shows our grid import throughout the month of October, which gives us a base rate, which is essentially just the ticking over little bits of grid import overnight, topping up the battery and heating the hot water. So the bigger ones here you can see are when we are charging the electric car. So you've got some days where it's over 25 kilowatt hours going into the car, but these lower days are just generally heating the hot water and topping up the battery when there hasn't been enough solar to charge the battery during the day. The second graph here is our grid export on the same month, so the scale isn't the same, but you can see some days we exported quite a bit during the day when the battery was full and the sun was still shining. We were able to export to the grid and get paid as part of a smart export guarantee tariff payment. So obviously you can see quite a few days where we exported 0 in October, which is pretty different from when you look back in the previous months in sort of September, August, back in the summer, when every single day of the month we generally were exporting something. So, as I mentioned, we're on a tariff from Octopus Go, which gives us a unit rate during the day of 31.41. So we're trying to avoid using any of the grid during the day as much as we can. That's from 4:30 in the morning till half past midnight at night. And then in that 4-hour window overnight, we get 9 pence per kilowatt hour to import from the grid. So that's when we do all of our usage. We charge the car, we heat the hot water in the tank, and we also charge the home battery now in October. And then our outgoing payment is 8 pence per kilowatt hour, no matter what time of the day we're doing that. Those of you who've been watching the channel throughout the summer will know that previously we were on the Octopus Flux tariff, which had various rates for various times of the day, and we were able to make more money while we were exporting more in the summer. But now that we're back towards the autumn-winter sort of time of year, we have much less generation and therefore we're not exporting very much, but we still need to charge the car, still need to charge the home battery overnight, and still need to heat hot water. So we decided to move to this tariff as it gets us cheaper energy when we need it overnight. So as you can see, I was mentioning the grid import's different throughout the year. If this is so far from January all the way through to October we have in 2023. As you can see, our grid import has stepped up considerably since last month. And again, that's basically offsetting what we can't get from the solar without charging the home battery overnight to use during the day. And also this is heavily affected by how much we need to charge the electric car. Anyone who has an electric car will know they use a lot of electricity. So when we're charging more, these graphs get skewed quite a lot, and if we're charging less, generally we're using a lot less in the grid, and I'll go into that a little bit more in another graph. So this graph shows the solar generation in green throughout the year, so obviously much higher in the summer period and much lower in the winter, and as we come down into autumn at the moment. And then we have a graph of our total consumption in the house, which includes everything we consume directly from the solar, everything that goes into charging the home battery, and everything we bring in from the grid is included in this blue line. So every kilowatt hour that we use in the property as a whole, for everything from electric heating, heating hot water, lights, cooking, everything, and including the electric car, that's our total consumption graph. So as you can see, somewhere in the middle of March, it crosses over where we're generating more than we're consuming on the house and the car in total. And then as you can see, sometime in September, it crosses over where we are no longer generating more than we are consuming in the house. These two bottom lines are our grid imports. As you can see, in the winter months, we generally importing quite a bit from the grid because the solar is so low. And then in the summer months, we're importing a lot less from the grid because the solar is a lot higher. What you can see is during the summer months, the two lines here, which is total grid consumption and how much of that grid consumption is charging the car, they are almost the same. That kind of shows that from the sort of springtime through to the end of the summer, all of our grid usage really is charging the car. The house is completely self-sufficient on the solar and battery, and then you can see in the winter there's a bit of a difference between how much is used from charging the car, and this difference here is how much then is used to charge the home battery. So again, very little home charging of the battery or other things such as hot water in this time of the year, and as we start getting into the more wintry weather, we have this bigger need to charge other things in the house, the home battery, so it's not just the car in these times of year. As I like to do in these videos, as anyone who's been watching for any other time will know, I like to pick a specific day in the month and see how that looked in terms of production, and then how that looked in terms of consumption, to kind of explain how things work during the day with the solar and the battery and how we use the energy we generate. So this is a typical day in October. As you can see, quite a late start now, 8 AM when this solar starts to generate. The peak's probably only around 3 kilowatt for us on our system at this time of year. A few cloudy spells here in the morning, and then it comes down pretty quickly in the afternoon, and by about 5 o'clock, I think on the 18th, it's already finished generating for the day. So not a long solar day at this time of year, and not very much generation. But let's see how that looks when we look at how we consume that energy. So this is the same graph, same day, to show the graph. You can see it's kind of stretched out, but this is that same profile here of the solar that we generated on this day. The large green block in the background is the state of charge of the battery. So from the day before, the battery is already up here at around 75 to 80%, and as you can see here, this is our grid consumption overnight in that off-peak window, and you can see here this grid consumption is charging the battery back up to 100%, and there's also some grid consumption here which was heating the hot water during this time. It doesn't look like we were charging the car overnight on this one, so you can see the import overnight is around 3 kilowatt, I think, so that's charging the battery there. So then you can see the grid is continuing to power the house overnight up until about 4:30, where the off-peak tariff ends, and you can see here then the battery starts to discharge to power the load in the house. And obviously the load in the house is pretty low in the morning. I think maybe somebody was had a cup of tea or something really early in the morning that day, who knows, something spiked a bit of use from the battery at that point. But generally you'll see our consumption here very low in the morning, and then here the sun comes up and you see the battery starts to charge again. On this particular day, the battery was charged middle of the morning, and this blue bar starts to appear, which is our export to the grid. So you can see here we're exporting quite a lot to the grid while the battery is full, and again the minimal usage during the day. I'd imagine we're probably both out at work during the day on this day, so there's very little usage in the house. And as you can see, then in the evening we start to use more energy and the battery starts to drain down here. After the sun goes down, the battery starts to kick in and power the house. These spikes here, I think, we have a small electric heater which we've been using through October, rather than having the main gas central heating on. A small electric heater to heat the lounge area downstairs, so you can see that ticking on and off during the evening, and then here probably cooking something for tea. You can see battery starts to drain down and we're back down at around 80% by the end of the day. So this has probably been a relatively good day that I chose here in terms of we had quite a lot of solar. Another day you might have seen the battery not fully charging and just draining completely throughout the day, all the way down to maybe 30 to 40% or something by the end of the day. But yeah, overall that kind of shows how we use the energy we generate and what happens to it. In this particular day we exported quite a lot, but as we go through the winter, those amount of exports will come down and the battery will play a much bigger role in powering the house during the day. So obviously everyone's always interested in the financials, so I usually go through a list here of how things are broken down. So as we mentioned earlier, 323 kilowatt hours of solar produced, 117 of those were exported to the grid, and 206 therefore consumed directly in the house, either at the time or into the battery. Our grid consumption was 354 kilowatt hours, and as you can see that's split between peak grid consumption and off-peak grid consumption. So almost all of this grid consumption is done overnight in that off-peak window where it's much cheaper. So we have charging the car, heating the hot water in the tank, and also charging the home battery. Usually this 18 is a bit lower, but I think we had a few days this month where we just had to charge the car briefly, or had something to do where we had to use more energy than we had at the time during those peak hours. And also there was a switch over between when we went from flux tariff to Go tariff, which may have messed up some of the calculations as well. So yeah, this graph here shows the breakdown of what we consumed versus what we exported. So we were able to consume nearly 64% of what we generated in October, and only 36% was exported to the grid. And as you can see here, if you break down what we consumed in the property between what was from solar, we got 37% almost from solar. Consumed from the off-peak grid was just under 60%, and therefore just over 3% was from the grid at peak times. That's really helping to drive that cost down. So looking at the financial side of it, it's really difficult to compare these with how much we think we would have spent on electricity if we didn't have solar, but I do this each month to kind of give you an idea. Standing charge for the month of £18.66, that's the same with and without solar. The cost for what we used on the grid this month was relatively high for us, £35.90, and obviously that's quite a lot of car charging off-peak, charging the battery this time of year, so £35.90. We estimate if we didn't have solar, then that grid usage would have cost £100.63. Electricity cost in total then is the standing charge plus the cost for the grid. So you can see here £54.56, whereas it would have been £119.28. We were able to earn £9.33 from our export earnings in October. Even from that low amount, it was still £9.33. So export earnings obviously without solar would have been zero. So therefore the net cost of electricity this month for us was £45.23, and it would have been, we estimate, £119.28. So monthly savings, therefore, the difference between these two of £74.05. This one is, again, I'll put a link in the description for this larger table. This summarises all those answers, all those calculations for the whole time since we've had the solar install. It's getting quite difficult to display this on the screen, it's quite small now, but as you can see, it's generally the same sort of numbers every month that we put together, and the graphs show how things change over the year in different seasons. It's a little bit complicated to try and explain all that so far, but the biggest number really is this number down here, which is our total cumulative savings, which are creeping up towards £3,000 of savings so far. again, it's hard to show exactly how much money you're saving because your consumption patterns definitely change, as we've noticed this ourselves. Once you have solar, you tend to try and do things more electrically, so you're using more electricity than you would be necessarily if you didn't have solar. And it's a bit of an estimate to say what percentage of your total you would have used and what times of the day you would have used it, because you can still use a lot of your electricity on an off-peak tariff even if you don't have solar. If you have a home battery, if you have a electric car, if you do your washing, dishwasher, that sort of thing overnight, you can still make a lot of savings even without the solar. So it's really hard to judge exactly how much money is being saved, but it can give an accurate idea of how much it's actually cost us to use electricity during this time. So this is an interesting one that I was a bit surprised by this month, comparing October this year with October last year. So October last year we had a very similar amount of production overall, so 12% roughly less, but similar. We exported a lot less this year because we were able to use a lot more of what we generated. We also imported a lot more from the grid, again almost entirely during that off-peak time was the additional grid requirement. But as you can see, the total consumption is relatively similar. If you include what we consumed directly from the solar and what we bought in from the grid, it's relatively similar amounts of consumption. But as you can see further down, if you go to the costs are very different. So last year it was cheaper the standing charge was lower, so we were already paying more in the standing charge, which is a bit of a con really, can't really do much about it, but last year the standing charge was cheaper. The cost for the grid electricity has gone up since last year because we've used more from the grid. So as you can see, that cost has increased. We actually exported a little more this year, so we made that back a little bit, but you can see the net cost of electricity is actually quite a bit higher this month. So overall, when you compare that with what we consider to be a lower cost without solar, because last year I was using different assumptions on how much things would have cost with the solar, without the solar, sorry. And this year I've changed those assumptions because I think you could probably be a little bit more conservative with it to try and be a bit more realistic. So if we say the cost without solar this month would have only been just under £120, there's a lot less savings there. So on comparison between last year and this year, you're looking at about £50 different in savings. And it's kind of theoretical, like this idea that you would know exactly what it would have cost you if you didn't have solar. It's hard to justify that. So it's probably somewhere between. Maybe I'm over conservative now compared to last year, maybe slightly bit more liberal with what I was expecting to pay if I hadn't had the solar. But overall, I know that my electricity cost me more this year than it did last year. So maybe we could say actually the assumption would be if I didn't have solar, it would have cost me even more. So yeah, those things are quite hard to predict, but let's go on to the payback calculator. Generally, this again is really hard to predict this because it's hard to predict savings. This again is available on the link in the description. It breaks down all of the assumptions that go into what we think we have saved on solar. So last year, the first year, when we calculated at the end of the year, we calculated we thought we'd saved £1,495 in that year. Being that we spent £15,000 on the solar system, the break-even point is somewhere around 8 years based on these assumptions. And again, you could probably just stick your finger in the air and get these assumptions. It's very hard to judge what annual inflation costs of electricity are going to be, and exactly what your usage assumptions are around when you do use grid power and when you don't use grid power. So for instance, I use an assumption that 7% of my grid usage is at peak time, whereas actually it's probably more like 2 or 3%, judging by the numbers that we get, but I'm trying to make it a bit more realistic. And also, yeah, how much do you use during the peak time and how much do you use outside of the peak time if you didn't have solar? So yeah, all these assumptions baked together give these answers, and if you want to play around with the numbers, download links in the description so you can have a look at how it would work potentially for your numbers. Moving on to the electric car, the Renault Zoe. This month we did 1,363 miles at an average of 4.4 miles per kilowatt hour. Very little home charging actually in comparison. 88.8 kilowatt hours of home charging at a cost of 9 pence a kilowatt hour gives us £7.99 total charging cost at home. We actually did some public charging, a couple of longer journeys this month. That was about £12.63 for £18.95. So you can see it's so much more expensive charging publicly. The vast majority of my charging gets done at work where it's free, and again, as I always say, it's very lucky that I do have that. So it's one of the major drivers to getting the electric car was that I wouldn't have to pay for travel to and from work, which is most of the miles I do in a month now. So total charging of 310.75 kilowatt hours, total cost of £20.62, which is an average of 7 pence per kilowatt hour if you average all of these out, which works out at 1.5p per mile this month. If we were assuming I was driving a 40 miles per gallon average petrol equivalent car, £1.54 a litre of petrol, that number there is wrong, that should say 1363. 1363 miles would have cost £238.56, which means that that should also say October, it's definitely getting late, £217.94 saved. So obviously with this sort of thing, if you do a lot of miles and you can charge for free for most of your charging, you're obviously going to save a lot of money on petrol. I like driving an electric car, it's perfect for me. I get to charge for free at work, but I also enjoy being able to charge at home and knowing that I'm not reliant on fossil fuel powered combustion cars. Little thing that came up this month is I've just signed up for the Octopus ElectrVerse. So as part of the Octopus customer sort of servicing, they sent me this, and it's a link. It's a card which allows you to charge up at multiple charging networks across the country. All the sort of major ones are there, Ionity, Instavolt, Osprey. Like, not every charger is on there, but you can use this card at every one that's in their ElectrVerse network. They've also allowed it to link to your Octopus account, so it can automatically add your charging cost to your energy bill, a direct debit at the end of each month, which works out quite good for us people. If you've got credit on your bill, then you can just offset your charging costs through your credit on your bill. You also get a 5% discount if you're an Octopus Go customer. So if you are looking to move to Octopus Go for your electricity tariff at home, you get a 5% discount on charging as well. There's a link in the description for a £5 referral link, which gives you £5 credit on your first charge. That seems like a pretty good deal. I mean, I've not used it yet. We only got it this month, but I've already got the card logged in and linked up to my account. So next time I need to charge some public charging, I'll just put it on that card and it can come off the Octopus bill. One other thing we have in the house, which I haven't mentioned yet so far, is the energy diverter, the My Energy Eddy. So this basically takes any excess energy and puts it into the hot water tank. So once the battery is full and if the sun is still shining, then it will automatically click the immersion heater on in the tank and start heating the hot water. This is a really nice way of heating hot water. It stops you having to use the gas to heat hot water through the gas boiler. But at the moment, it's not actually saving any money. The idea was that you would save money by not having to heat the gas and heat the water with the gas. But now that export payments on electricity are higher, as you can see, we get 8 pence to export during the day, but it only costs us 9 pence to import at night. So it's not really saving us any money. Basically, I think I might have got this calculation wrong this month actually, because it's costing us 9p at night. If we don't export during the day, we lose 8p, and it costs us 9p to do that at night. So for every kilowatt hour that we don't export that goes into the tank, then we lose a penny. So you could realistically say that £107 and 107.5 kilowatt hours into the eddy has lost us £1.08 this month. So it's again very difficult to calculate this sort of savings exactly. And I think also what this number here also relates to the overnight heating of the hot water that we put into the tank as well. So it's not all actually export savings, but there or thereabouts, it's pretty much cost neutral now. It's not saving us money, it's not costing us much money, but the idea is that we can heat the hot water during the day from any excess solar that we're not currently using. So it's another way that we can directly use what we want, what we're generating on site, which is really positive for us. So what I like to do at the end of these videos, as you probably know, is give myself a little plug and say if anybody is considering moving over to Octopus Energy for any of their tariffs, whether that be a EV tariff like Octopus Go, or whether it would be more of a solar tariff for Octopus Flux or any of their agile tariffs, please do consider using the referral link in the description. You'll get £50 credit on your bill when you move over, and I will also get £50 credit on my bill. Massive thank you to everyone who has used that code over the last year or so. It's been a huge help to us here in our house to help pay the energy bills through the winter. So yeah, again, if you are considering moving over, do consider looking for the link in the description. And yeah, just a quick reminder again, there's that ElectrVerse code. If anyone's looking to sign up for ElectrVerse, you get an extra £5 credit if you use the link in the description below. So that's pretty much it, actually. Yeah, quite a long one there, really. The main takeaways, I think, for this month was that, yes, as ever, I'll always say in these videos that yes, solar panels are worth it. The difference is how you use the energy you generate. Do you have it charging an electric car? Do you charge a home battery? Do you heat the hot water? Do you simply export it and get paid for the exports? There's a lot of ways in which this can work. And it really does depend on your usage, your consumption patterns in the house. Can you alter a few things that then help you save more money or earn more money from exports? There's a lot of things to consider when looking at solar, and a lot of it is actually down to that tariff. So again, I know it's a bit of a plug for Octopus, but they do have a really good variety of tariffs that can really help you make the most out of the solar. There's a million options out there when it comes to solar in terms of who to get your panels from, who to get, what batteries to buy, all those sort of things. And it's really hard to sort of objectively say what's better and what's worse. It really does depend on your use in the house, how your house is set up and what you're going to use that energy for. But yeah, as ever, any questions, any comments, please do drop them in the comment boxes below. It's really interesting to see what everyone else is up to in their generation and their solar, and if you're considering getting solar, feel free to ask questions in there. There's loads of people who like answering the questions on what they've done and what they think's better, so if you've got any questions, please do drop them in there. But other than that, thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.